Sorry about that, babe.
What's up, guys? As we have kind of switched focus back to live streaming, my offline, non-live streaming content, whatever you want to call it, has kind of fallen to the wayside, so I thought of a couple ideas to kind of get things going there, and this is one of them. I thought it would be pretty fun and interactive to ask the community what their top 10 favorite games are for specific consoles. So recently I shared a Google form on my Discord as well as my community or post tab on YouTube, asking everybody what their top 10 favorite NES games are. And again, I want to reiterate that I'm probably going to continue on with this trend, but the only way that your entries actually get involved in the creation of the video and the final tallies and all that kind of stuff is if you actually do enter it into the Google form. If you fill it out manually, I didn't count it. Sorry. So this video is going to be pretty quick, down and dirty. We're just going to kind of go through and analyze things from the list and point out things that I thought were pretty interesting. So hopefully you enjoy. And again, if you do and you want to stay part of it, stay tuned for the ones in the future. Also, it's worth mentioning now that if you want to share your own personal top 10 list, even if you already did it officially on the Google form, feel free to put that in the comments below. Also, I apologize, I don't have the best setup for these types of videos. I normally like to look directly into my camera, but the fact of the matter is, if I turn over here, my audio is going to be better. So I'm going to be basically doing that while I read the list. I also forgot to mention that there were 23 official entries of their top 10. I'm hoping maybe with this video and more exposure, perhaps we can get some more next time. But let's dive into the results. Alright, the game with the most _1 votes was Super Mario Bros. 3, which was named the #1 overall game 4 times. Now, I'm not really surprised by that. Anybody that knows that Super Mario Bros. 3 is one of the best platformers of all time. It is actually my favorite Super Mario Bros. Game. I do typically waffle between 3 and Super Mario World, but I think if you put a gun to my head, so to speak, I would probably pick Super Mario Bros. 3, so that's a very safe choice. Now, the interesting thing is the game with the second most #1 overall votes, and that would be Tecmo Super Bowl with 3. Now, I think I know exactly who did these. I'm not going to name names because of anonymity. I will out that my #1 overall NES game actually is Tecmo Super Bowl as well. We'll get into this a little bit more later, so I'll just kind of keep this surface level. Tecmo Super Bowl is without a doubt one of the greatest sports games of all time. For me, it is my second overall favorite sports game of all time. It is definitely my favorite football game of all time. Oftentimes people will confuse Tecmo Bowl with Tecmo Super Bowl, or, quite frankly, they weren't exposed to Tecmo Super Bowl and they were only exposed to Tecmo Bowl. Now, Tecmo Bowl is a great game, don't get me wrong, but Tecmo Super Bowl trumps it in just about every single way that you can. Even if you're not the biggest sports fan, if you haven't really played Tecmo Super Bowl, I recommend that you do. It's a lot deeper than it appears. You could totally play it 100% casually, but I mentioned Bits and Glory originally started as a Tecmo Super Bowl online league. There's a lot of competition to be had. There's a competitive online gaming community, in-person gaming communities. I don't play Tecmo Super Bowl anymore. That's a different time of my life, but I just want to pump Tecmo Super Bowl a little bit. Give it a go if you haven't, seriously. And now we actually have a 3-way tie for the third place #1 votes. Does that make sense? A 3-way tie between The Legend of Zelda, Final Fantasy, and Dragon Warrior or Dragon Quest IV. Each of those received 2 #1 votes. So not entirely surprising there. Looking at those names, they're pretty big heavy hitters, and obviously my channel has a very, very big RPG community, so you're gonna see games like Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior all over the list, clearly. Also not necessarily surprised to see Zelda up there. You know, Legend of Zelda is a wonderful game. You know, obviously don't want to go on too much about the main Nintendo mascot games, like it's pretty clear that they're legendary for a reason. Now, out of all the #1 overall votes, if you will, out of the 23 entries, this is probably the one that surprised me the most. Somebody picked Blaster Master. Now, Blaster Master is a game that I haven't really done much with. Clearly, I've played it. I've tested cartridges out over the years, but I never sat down to actually try to beat it. I think the inclusion of Blaster Master on this list is actually kind of convincing me to go give it a try sometime soon. Maybe we'll stream it, who knows? And clearly, I say clearly, you're never really sure, but I'm pretty sure that this is the #1 super outlier / joke answer. Somebody put Bible Adventures as their #1 game. I mean, objectively, subjectively speaking, I'm pretty sure it's a joke, so just wanted to throw that in there. Now let's look at the games that had the most votes overall. The game with the most overall votes was Super Mario Bros. 3 with 14 different entries. Obviously, Super Mario Bros. 3 also had the most #1 overall votes. The game that appeared the second most times, with 13 entries, was The Legend of Zelda. And the games that appeared the third most times on the list, with 10, was Contra and Punch-Out! I also thought it was interesting to note that there were 54 games that only had one vote, and across all 23 entries, so 10 games apiece times 23 entries equals 230 unique entries total, there were 95 different games mentioned across the 230 entries. And now I thought it'd be fun to kind of look at series results. So obviously there's a lot of series on the NES, and many of them made a lot of appearances in these lists. So a series, for example, would be the Super Mario Bros. Series, where there's 1, 2, and 3. And I did allow for Famicom games, so obviously there would be 4 of them total, technically. But there was no actual appearance of the real Super Mario Bros. 2 that appeared only in Japan. So what better way to start with the fact that there were 23 different entries for the Super Mario Bros. Series. Up next, there were 19 entries for Zelda, Zelda 1 and 2, 14 entries for Contra, which for the purpose of this list was only Contra and Super C, nobody voted for Contra Force, 13 different entries for Castlevania, 12 entries for Mega Man, 11 entries for Dragon Warrior, and 7 entries for TMNT, or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Obviously for that series on the NES, you have TMNT 1, TMNT 2 the arcade game, TMNT 3, the Manhattan Project, and then TMNT Tournament Fighters. That did not appear on anybody's list, by the way. And lastly, I wanted to go over more surprises that I found on these lists. At least they were surprises to me. Touching back earlier, I mentioned Tecmo's Super Bowl. It had the number 2 most number 1 overall votes on the list. However, other than those 3 number 1 votes, Tecmo Super Bowl appeared nowhere else on anybody's list. I thought that was interesting. It was the top tier GOAT for 3 people, and then nobody else paid it any mind. I was actually also surprised that there were only 3 total votes for Metroid. Now again, I will admit on my list, Metroid didn't make the cut, but I love Metroid. It probably would have been number 11 or 12 for me. I was just kind of taken back that there was only 3 votes for it. The same goes for the Ninja Gaiden games. There were only 3 total series votes. I think the votes were for Ninja Gaiden 1 and Ninja Gaiden 3. 2 wasn't mentioned on anybody's list either. Another surprise for me was there were 3 votes for Battle of Olympus. Now this is a game that I've known about. Again, I've tested a cartridge, I played a little bit here and there. Kind of seems similar to Faxanadu or Zelda 2. I think the fact that it appeared on 3 people's list kind of makes me want to dive into it a little bit more, so I think that could be a possible stream game in the future. Another surprise to me as a big fan of Tetris, there were only 2 total votes for Tetris on this. I think somebody also voted for Tetris 2, but for the first Tetris it was only 2 votes. Now again, being a Tetris fan, I could fully admit that that version of Tetris isn't necessarily the most fun one to play these days, but between that and the Game Boy version probably will end up ranking higher when we do that list. It was pretty revolutionary for the time, and it's kind of one of those staple games to me that's not like a Nintendo mascot, so it was a little bit surprising. And this was surprising to me, but also not really, because it was actually my number 2 game. There were 5 total votes for Batman, which made it the top non-Nintendo IP, so like not Zelda, Mario, Metroid. Nor was it a top mainstream game. I guess in that you'd probably throw in stuff like Castlevania and Mega Man, and obviously Batman isn't an RPG either, so it's basically the top performing game out of that bunch. And honestly, it deserves it. If you haven't played Batman yet, do yourself a favor and please do so. I think it's one of, if not the best movie tie-in games of all time, and it's one of, if not the best platformer on the NES, and I mean that. Alright guys, so that's it for this list. Like I said, it's going to be kind of down and dirty, and I kind of want to do these continuously for a bunch of other consoles. So if you're interested in participating, again, make sure to either join the Discord and stay tuned for when I drop the next Google form, or stay tuned for the YouTube community tab. And I think I'm probably just going to move forward and do SNES next. I know I just kind of put this in the video, so I kind of locked myself in. I might change, but I think we're going to go SNES, which should be very interesting and very tough for me personally to choose a top 10. So again, if you want to have your votes, if you will, participate in these videos, please make sure to fill out the Google form, otherwise I can't count it. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this, just a quick little fun video for you, get some community interaction. If you did enjoy it, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I mentioned earlier, leave your personal top 10 list in the comments below. Just curious to see. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.